Shooter, are you ready? Stand by.
What up, YouTube? Gunner South here. Thought I'd do something, it's kind of a twist on what you see out there already. I've seen some guys do sort of the beginner's equipment for IDPA, and that's sort of what this is going to be. But I'm going to take it a little further beyond just the beginner setup. So let's start with the basics, right? You're interested in shooting IDPA. You're interested in shooting, we'll even throw this out there where you're shooting USPSA. What do you need? Well, you need a pistol, you need magazines, you need ammunition, and you need ear and eye pro. Alright, if you're shooting IDPA, you need 3 magazines. If you're shooting USPSA, you're probably going to want about 6 magazines. But that's why a lot of people like IDPA, because it's really easy to get into. You need a holster, a gun, 3 magazines, and mag holsters for those 3 magazines. And usually the most of the weekly matches that I know take about 100 rounds of ammunition. So that's your basic setup. I know a lot of guys have done the intro equipment to IDPA, but I thought I would go a little further into what works for me, what I've found is the better equipment overall, and sort of my reasonings behind it. We'll also touch on the gun a little bit and maybe some of the modifications that you're going to want to make for IDPA once you get beyond just the beginner stage. So let me point these out. These are my mag holsters. These are sort of my catch-all, fit-all, work-for-all mag holsters. This is what I started with, and there's nothing wrong with these. However, they're Blackhawk. How they do is they keep this little tab in here, and that pushes against the magazine to keep it straight up and down. The other thing I have is and this is going to be sort of like beyond beginner IDPA, is you're going to want a nice Kydex reinforced belt. USPSA and IDPA have different rules on the type of belt you can have. USPSA, you probably want to invest in one of those double alpha belts. For me personally, I'm using an IDPA approved belt, which is basically I'll have to maybe take pictures of it and show here. It's a nylon belt with Kydex reinforcement. But here's the issue that I run into with the Blackhawk ones. Basically, they were meant to fit pretty much any duty holster, and you can, that's millimeters, and you can see they're like 2 inches, right? So they're meant to fit up to a 2-inch duty belt. And so what that means is, while you want it to sit straight up and down, it can cant forward and backwards, which I didn't hate necessarily in USPSA. I could cant it a little forward on some of them, move them around. And that's sort of the advantage of this particular set of mag holsters, is that you can slide them around real easy. They clip on, clip off, so you don't have to take them off your belt that much. But they will wiggle sort of at angles. And when you're reaching back there and you want to get a consistent grab every time on that, you don't want to hit it while it's leaning back, or you don't want it to be too far forward. As you work your skills and your reloads, you want it to be at a consistent place on your belt, and you don't want it to be canted at an angle that you haven't practiced already. So that, I think, rules these out for after your first month or 2 of IDPA. So if you want to try several sports, if you haven't decided whether you want to use IDPA or USPSA, these can be good one-offs. Like, you have a double one, like I have in my Glock 41 videos. You have a double mag pouch that's right together, but then you're going to go shoot USPSA and you need like another 3 mags. Well, these will fit that gap real easy. I also still use these for the behind, the back, the very starting mag. I'll still throw one of these on in the back because it's nice and I can move it around on my belt. Like if we're going to be sitting down on a chair at the beginning of the stage, I don't like the mag holster directly in the back because then it'll hook on the chair. So these have a lot of flexibility, but I would say that as soon as you can replace them with nicer ones with narrower bands and holds onto your belt better, or some like double mag pouches. I think a double mag pouch for IDPA, I think I'm not sure. I think Blackhawk might also make that same one. I'll link it here. Those are probably what you're going to want to move to pretty quick, because In IDPA, you only need 2, and they're going to be in the same place on your hip every time. Every time you reach back, it's going to be there. So that's sort of your mag holsters. This is a great beginner one, but you're going to quickly either upgrade or just skip that set altogether. That brings me to, I guess, ammunition. So one of the things a lot of people do, they go out, they buy like Freedom Munitions, Atlanta Arms, usually 115 grain stuff. In my opinion, as soon as you can, you're going to want to start reloading, and your basement will have a lot of this laying around, and it will take over your entire basement, and you'll be playing with loads, and this entire thing needs to be pulled. Or alternatively, I did that review on Cook Ammunition. You can order from him and just have it done. If I was going to say intermediate and I didn't want to get into reloading yet because it is an investment, check out those guys that make a bullet recipe, bullet load specifically for competition. Cook Ammunition does one that does a 9mm minor and a 40 major, so it's got you covered for both sports. Because the 115 grain stuff is going to be just snappier, and you just ask around, and you'll ask everybody, and they'll be like, oh, I'm shooting 147s, I'm shooting 125s. I've had guys that shoot 165s, right, in 9mm, 165 grain bullet. That's insane. And they have to mess with their recoil springs to get that to work. So just past beginner, I think this is beginner, is whatever the range sells you. I think just past beginner is buying some specifically made reloads for match ammunition, and Cook Ammunition is a good one. So let's talk about holster for a second. So in my other holster vids, what you saw what I have here, which is a Comtac International. However, the one I had when I started was not a belt holster, it was a paddle holster. And that had its own set of challenges. Okay, when I first started out, yeah, paddle holster worked just fine. I was able to slide it around on my belt for USPSA. Maybe you wanted a little bit of forward cant. You didn't quite have your draw stroke down, so you wanted to, move and tweak and adjust, whatever. And that was easier to do in a paddle holster. But ultimately, once I figured it out, this was actually a much bigger upgrade than I suspected. I was going from a paddle to a belt holster. And everybody says it, and when you have a paddle holster, you're like, whatever, yeah, right. But when you actually do make the change to it, you notice a difference. And it is absolutely worth, in my opinion, that once you're beyond a beginner stage, to go ahead and get a belt holster. A belt, like a holster that clips to your belt, that's not just a paddle holster that sits on your belt. I can't fault anything wrong with this Comtac. I bought another one because it's one that works. But let's discuss a little bit on the reasons why this one in particular is a good one for the production division and for IDPA. One, it's legal, okay? IDPA has a lot of sort of rules around where the front of the back strap or front of the grip can be in relationship to your belt. This keeps the gun up high enough to where it's not a drop offset holster like you can have in, say, limited or open division for USPSA. So this is a production legal holster, and it is an IDPA legal holster. Another thing that you'll notice is that this is cut to expose the chamber, and that is a competition thing. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe you guys who have a duty holster also use it, but what that's meant for is when you're pulling your gun, you should be applying front pressure on the pistol so that when it comes out, it immediately pops out over that, and you're going to want it to come out as soon as it's available, as soon as possible. And so that cut is well within the legal limits of a IDPA legal holster. So when you're drawing, you're pulling forward. You can also see it hasn't beat up my Glock finishes or anything. No, it's a Glock. I don't know. I can't speak for you guys that have a cheap finish, but it is what it is. It's I think, an intermediate holster, right? This is beyond just whatever, say, like Springfield gives you one. That's just a paddle holster, and it works fine. But it doesn't cover the full length of the pistol. I like that because we do kind of do a little bit more obstacles, and you don't want to beat up the front of your gun, so it covers enough of the muzzle to protect it. But more specifically, it actually clips to your belt. And to me, that's sort of a requirement for intermediate gear, that you're going to want a holster that provides that consistent draw each time, because it's in a consistent place on your belt. So that pretty much covers holsters. So let's talk about ear protection real quick, because I think this is a big deal. Electronic earmuffs, basically. I think after you have started shooting on a regular basis, I think you should invest in electronic earmuffs. They're not that expensive. Admittedly, they are much more expensive than like the $5 muffs that you can get elsewhere, or even the 25-cent plugs, but it helps you stay aware of what's going on a lot easier. You're not taking your earmuffs on and off for like a stage brief, which is really big. Stage brief, you want to hear exactly what that ROSO is saying, so that you know exactly how to shoot the stage. This is pretty much the most popular one ever, is these Howard lights. I don't particularly like these as much as some other models. I have yet to upgrade, but I could tell you that these are a little tough on the inside, so if you don't have thin right here, you might want to double up. Like the pivot heads that I have are very thick, so I double up, especially because I shoot an indoor match. So then I absolutely need the electronic, because if I'm doubling up Ear Pro, I need this to amplify the sound so I can get through the Ear Pro that I'm wearing. So I think this is intermediate equipment that you're going to want for shooting. It's beyond just your regular muffs, and a little bit more expensive, but that's how it goes. Eye Pro, I don't have anything to say about eye protection. It needs to be rated properly, I guess. That would be the biggest thing. If you shoot a lot of steel, you should invest very smartly in your eye protection, because it will send lead spall back at you. Alright, and then finally, I'm going to kind of go over sort of two things for intermediate step. One, on your pistol, nearly every competition shooter, or at least a lot of them, like a vast majority of them, believe in fiber optic front, blacked out rear. That is what you will see on probably 90% of the competitors' pistols. And it's just something that you don't realize happens when you start shooting competition. You're like, I've always shot 3-dot. Why would I do anything other than 3-dot or night sights? Well, because when you're shooting competition, the front sight is pretty much everything. You're going to want to watch it bob and weave, and all of your focus is pretty much on that front sight. And when it's moving around and when you're shooting, focus is on the front sight. So that's why nearly everybody uses fiber optic front, and you don't, the rears just become, you don't want to have attention attracted to the rear of the gun. You want it all to remain on the front sight. So you can't go wrong with Dawson's, you can't go wrong with Zev's, and you can't go wrong with I think Warren Precision. So I think an intermediate equipment for IDPA or USPSA is going to be upgrading your sights to competition set. Just the way it is. And then finally, I think going from a beginner to an intermediate competitor, if you will, is trigger job on your pistol of choice. I think most people, if you have a Glock, it's as simple as swapping out some springs, and you learn what the guts of a Glock looks like. I mean, literally, you can spend about $15 on springs that include shipping and have a dramatically different trigger pull. It's a much smoother, nicer trigger on any of your Glocks. So consider that. Consider taking it to your gunsmith and having them upgrade the trigger. I've got some like $50 trigger job videos on some 1911s if you want to keep it cheap. And $50 is actually specific to para. Like, you could actually be cheaper on 1911. All you really need to do is replace a spring. 2 springs. You need to replace 2 springs for 1911 to dramatically lower the feel of the trigger, the weight of the trigger. And You know, these are things that I think any competent intermediate level person can do in an afternoon. I mean, YouTube is an amazing resource. So I really think that once you can get your trigger down below like a 6.5 pound trigger, if you get it to a 3 pound trigger, it's going to make a pretty big difference in your accuracy. It just is. It's much more forgiving. Now, some guys, you know, they're going to object to me changing the sights and changing the trigger because they want to practice their everyday carry. And I have no problem with that. I think if you're shooting competition with your everyday carry, you know, by all means leave it the way it is. And another video I'm going to make is going to be talking about doing just that. So, but I think if you've gone and you've splurged on a Glock 34, which, I mean, let's be honest, Glock 34 is a tactical slash practical, which is, I mean, it was put together for USPSA, right? It was made to fit the box. Then I think you should make it a competition gun. Especially as you get much more serious and you want to be more competitive, go ahead and spend the money. And like I said, you can spend like $15 on springs and around. Sights are the biggest ripoff. They're like $80, $90 for like 2 pieces of metal, but you really is kind of a required thing. I mean, I think it makes a big difference when you're looking at just a single red dot bouncing and you're trying to get that on target quick. It does make a difference. So nearly every competitive gun I have, when I buy it, you know, the gun, and I know I'm going to swap out the sights. The dot and bucket on a Glock standard works, but it's not ideal. So another thing is really, and I don't think I ever mentioned this, for me, I in particular like a very thin front sight and a sort of wide gap in the back. Now, a lot of people like it flush, but the reason I'm doing that, sort of the science, is that your eye is actually very good in lining up automatically the front sight in the middle of a post. And so in quick shooting, I want space, I want daylight so that I can see the sight moving, so I can reacquire it quicker. Than I want bullseye accurate, no space, no daylight in between. So but that's sort of my summary on what I think going from beginner to intermediate gear looks like when you're shooting IDPA. Let me know what you think. I know some of you guys are a lot better than me, so give me a comment, give me a like, share, let me know what you think. Thanks, YouTube.